Part 35. Endless Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 356. In the early morning, the three of them said goodbye to the caretaker's cabin they had lived with for 8 months. Anticipating that they would not be able to return to Frost Moon Academy in a short time, they no longer wore Frost Moon Academy uniforms, but changed into casual clothes from the wardrobe. Several others have been waiting here for a long time at Shimizuki Academy's special airport for the aviation-guided ship, and they are all ready to go. Instructor Letica was dragging a big suitcase, and her light-colored long skirt still looked as mature as when she was wearing a uniform. Rilu, who was wearing a school uniform, didn't have too many belongings. Lanming and Xiaoluo also put on rare summer outfits. Compared to when they first met on the airship, they no longer need to hide their identities, and their figures in crisp casual clothes look even more glamorous. Anja was still wearing the maid outfit she wore when she worked at Principal Phyllis's place. It seemed that she was very fond of the blue and white uniform. Ika-san, although you asked us to gather here, there is nothing here. It is too early now, and the maintenance personnel of the dedicated airport have not yet started work. The helipad pointed by Instructor Letica was now empty, and even the earliest civilian airships had not taken off yet. You will know later, Teacher Letica. Ika looked around at everyone present. What I want to say at this moment has already been said before setting off, now I just need to take that step. He raised his right hand, and the silver wrist wheel reflected the brilliance of the morning sun. Hitomi, do you need some preparation time? Even if he asked this, Hitomi, who rarely spoke even when face to face, would of course just respond with silence. A sight that seemed to contain no emotion seemed to appear in front of Ika's eyes, and she was looking at herself playfully through the silver wrist wheel. Having no choice but to get an answer, Ika stretched out her hand towards the empty tarmac. Mechanical alchemy. He knew that this was Hitomi's departure gift to him, and all the information about this gift flooded into Ika's mind. This is mechanical alchemy that is incomparable to any weapon so far. Ika believes in Hitomi, and at the same time believes that she can definitely present this gift in reality. Yatrassel. Cube-shaped magic cubes quickly gathered in the empty airport in front of them, building up the prestige that Ika called out. The streamlined shape appears in the flowing silver-white magic power. It is a huge body that can shock all viewers. Unlike the aviation-guided ships of the BZ Empire and Frost Moon Academy, the design of multiple sets of gunports installed throughout the hull was once only used on ancient ocean ships. However, with such a combined force, only one of them could crush a giant fourth-tier monster that could only be defeated by a squad of national magicians. When Shimizuki Academy held its final practical test in the Central Square last semester, the 4th class, cave beetles broke through the loopholes in Shimizuki Academy's barrier from the ground and invaded the venue, causing a large-scale panic of extremely bad nature. Ika used the joint weapon Mobile 6 Link to work with Way 11 and Lilith to knock down the cave beetle. He can still clearly recall the feel of driving this joint weapon. After studying the knowledge of magic mechanics in Professor Kokina's laboratory, Ika can now tell at a glance that this united weapon is an improved version of the Mobile 6 unit. The magnificent silver-white armor is engraved with a gorgeous coat of arms that has been submerged by history and symbolizes the mechanical alchemy of the Kin's family. There were gentle exclamations from the people around him, bringing Ika's mind, which was immersed in the majesty of Yatrassel, back to reality. This is my partner, Hitomi. This aviation magic ship is her gift to us. Ika showed the silver wristband exterior to everyone. Then, this aviation magic ship will be our base of activities from now on. Hey, there is no record in the student records that Ika is also a magic equipment holder. Lilu-san, don't worry about details like this. Teacher Letica once witnessed Ika using the ability of mechanical alchemy in the ruins, and already knew his hidden true identity. If this aviation magic ship is the product of mechanical alchemy, doesn't Ika-san need to maintain his abilities all the time? Rather than saying that I am maintaining my abilities, To be more precise, it should be Hitomi who is working hard. There is absolutely nothing I can do. I see, Hitomi is very powerful. Instructor Letica looked at Ika's silver wrist wheel in disbelief, and the eyes of several others also focused on the eyes of Fiery Flame. Hitomi probably wouldn't be willing to show her presence here, and Ika suddenly felt a little regretful. Yggdrasil seems to be the name of an aviation magic ship during the cross-border war. As he climbed the stairs entwined with ivy, Lanming suddenly recalled the name of the ship that he seemed to have heard before. Really? I don't know that. I see. After hearing what Her Royal Highness the Princess said, I was also somewhat impressed by the name Yggdrasil. I remember that Yggdrasil was a very famous aviation magic ship during the cross-border war. There seems to be no more information about this aviation magic ship recorded in history, only its name was recorded. If my guess is correct, it should have been made by the mechanical alchemy ability of Chi's family in the past. The internal structure of the aviation magic ship Yggdrasil is not much different from the aviation magic ships that everyone has boarded before. That is because the design concept of modern aviation magic ships is based on the ancient aviation magic ships. Based on. Ika has not yet dabbled in the esoteric aspects of magic mechanics, and has only a partial understanding of the design concept of an aviation magic ship. However, he knows everything about this aviation magic ship that he has boarded for the first time, perhaps because of Hitomi's contribution. Charlotte and Anja found the cockpit. The cockpit is centered on the captain's seat, surrounded by control seats and communication seats. The walls are densely covered with seemingly complex control panels and various displays. This structure is not only very similar to a modern aviation magic ship, but also permeates an elegant and traditional classical atmosphere. But the dashboard on the console was filled with completely unfamiliar characters. It's really an ancient aviation guided ship. Let me explain it a little bit. Although I can't understand what's written on it, I probably know what it's for. Ika began to convey the unfamiliar words that came to her mind to the girls. Lanming and Xiaoluo, both former royals and former nobles, had received knowledge about aviation-guided ships and understood Ika's explanation faster. So the helmsman made a hasty decision. Fortunately, whether it is an ancient aviation-guided ship or a modern aviation-guided ship, it can be completely turned over to autonomous driving as soon as it takes off. Before setting off, everyone already knew the reason why the ocean fleet was named after the word sea fog from Lanming and Xiaoluo's advance explanation. That kind of mist is the product of magic equipment ability. Not only can it cause discomfort in the body such as difficulty breathing, but it can also hide its whereabouts from any detection. Therefore, only by using the resonance and synchronization of Candle Dragon Gold can their positions be roughly determined. This is a very risky approach. When Lanming performs wide area synchronization in the sea, other people may also notice the existence of Candle Dragon Gold. At a time when the Bes Empire and the Nemesis Society were considered a thorn in the side, this approach was tantamount to setting oneself on fire. But if you are lucky, you can enter the shelter of the Sea Fog fleet before the enemy notices. Now that there are risks associated with any move, everyone can only use the simplest way of thinking, which is to take one step at a time and see one step at a time. While waiting to arrive at the target sea area, the first thing they had to do was to place their luggage in their respective rooms. This kind of room layout is somewhat similar to the royal family's aviation magic ship. Lanming probed and looked at the cabin, which was divided into different sections by the hatch. The functional areas and living areas were divided in an orderly manner. Anja helped push Instructor Letica's suitcase into the room, and Instructor Letica kept nodding in thanks. Ika, I suddenly thought of a very subtle question. Since Lingdu thought it was very subtle, it was really very subtle. If we need to return to the ground, it will be difficult to find a dedicated airport for the aviation magic ship to land. What will happen then? Well, don't worry about this problem. There seems to be a device here that can teleport vertically back to the ground. The moment before Ling raised the question, Aika had not realized that such a device existed. It was an incredible feeling, and the answers Aika wanted to know immediately came to mind. You don't need to think too much to know that this is Hitomi's conscious operation. In this case, wouldn't it be more straightforward to explain it in person? Endless Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 357. Yggdrasil sailed for 2 hours at an altitude of 10,000 meters, and now has left the neutral area and entered the surrounding waters. Charlotte lowered the flight altitude of Yggdrasil to 3,000 meters according to the scheduled plan, and stayed in the air above the sea. Lan Ming walked onto the open deck and began to conduct wide area synchronization of the surrounding sea areas. The golden eyes flashed with a seductive light, and the coat of arms of the Ela family floated into the air. Synchrony, start. Charlotte and Anja stayed in the cockpit to monitor surrounding enemy ships that might be approaching. Their other task was to monitor signal responses in the sea area. Aika and others left the bridge and came to the deck, guarding behind Lan Ming. Resonance, start dash. Time passed by minute. If Lan Ming's resonance synchronization lasts for 1 second longer, there will be more risks. In the cockpit, the two of them stared intently at the different displays, making sure not to miss any signal. Suddenly, a separate red dot flashed in the center of one of the monitors. Not from the airspace, but from the sea directly below Yggdrasil. Only 4 people boarded the Sea Mist fleet, and the remaining 4 people stayed in the aviation magic ship Yggdrasil. The true purpose of the Sea Mist fleet is still unknown, and it may be a great risk if all members leave the stronghold. The final candidates to board the ship were Lan Ming and Xiaoluo, who had communicated with them before, while Aika and Ling came forward from Xuanjiu Academy. The silver magic circle carried the 4 people and slowly landed on the foggy deck. The view was not very good in the thick sea fog, and there was no one on the spacious deck. It was not like this. The figure of a woman wearing a sharp military uniform is looming in the thick fog, and her long pale golden hair tied up to her waist is fluttering in the biting sea breeze. In her hand she held a scimitar with a guard. Captain Philly. Hitomi. While Lan Ming tried to call her name, the woman's knees bent slightly. The moment her figure disappeared from the spot, Aika reflexively called out Hitomi's name. The scimitar blade collided with the silver long-barreled cannon body, creating dazzling sparks. The impact on the long-barreled cannon body made Aika's arms numb. This force was really inconsistent with the slender female figure. The woman drew her sword and struck out again with a sharp sound of breaking the wind. This time Aika had a rough understanding of the power of her attack and was not knocked back even half a step. Silver's long-barreled cannon body has become part of Aika's limbs, using its simple bluntness to resolve the sword light that cuts through the thick fog again and again. This kind of sword-dancing attack was far different from that of a certain girl Aika knew well. During the back and forth thrusts and blocks, Aika's finger pressed on the trigger of the silver barrel. The firearms created by mechanical alchemy are not used as cold weapons for head-on confrontation, but are more suitable for solving problems simply and neatly by pulling the trigger. Without pulling the trigger, Aika is merely on par with women. But is it really necessary to go to that extent? From her attack, Aika did not feel the hostility she felt when facing the 3 Imperial Knights. While Aika was hesitating, the scimitar slashed out again with a whistling sound, and a golden figure galloped past Aika. Draw the knife and chop upward. Ling's sword of light traced a half-moon-shaped golden trajectory in the thick fog, and cut off the shining scimitar with one blow. The woman whose scimitar was cut off was knocked back a few steps away, staggering and using the broken blade to support her body. Before the golden slash trajectory dissipated, Ling had already put away her sword and stepped back. Isn't this way of greeting a little too much? Ling Xian walked up to Aika and asked the woman he met for the first time. Her hand still did not let go of the hilt of the light flame sword. If the woman chooses to fight again, she will cut off her opponent's weapon again. The woman didn't seem to be too hurt, as Ling only destroyed her weapon. She threw away the useless scimitar in her hand with some regret, and raised her hands with a wry smile that was totally out of tune with the tense atmosphere. "Surrender, surrender, I have no weapons anymore." "Captain Feli, does this approach have any special significance?" Lan Ming stepped forward. "Charlotte and I were also tested like this when we came to your place." Although Lan Ming still had a smile on her face, it could be heard in her tone that she was asking the women to explain why everyone was treated with swords as soon as they boarded the ship. "Oh, actually it doesn't have any special meaning." The woman patted the military uniform she was wearing, spread her hands and confessed to everyone, "Because this way we can more directly understand the level of the new two people. It's better to do less of this kind of thing. I almost pulled the trigger just now." "It doesn't matter if you pull the trigger, it won't cause any harm to me." I don't know if the woman is bluffing or stating the truth, but she smiles nonchalantly. "The captain of the Sea Fog Fleet," Feli raised her hand, and the thick fog quickly dissipated as if it was absorbed by the sea water, and clear sunlight fell on the deck. Just like when Lan Ming and Xiaoluo visited, this fleet showed its full picture in the eyes of the recipients. Ling also put away the light flame sword, and her vigilance towards Feli was limited to stopping her attacks. Originally, this kind of sea fog would make people feel uncomfortable. But we didn't feel that way just now, so I don't think Captain Feli wants to threaten us. If Princess Lan Ming hadn't asked me to do so, even I might not have been able to hold back. I took a lot of effort to hold back the attack just now." Ling could use the sword skills engraved in his body smoothly, but to suppress the natural reflex of his muscles, it was more laborious to interrupt the stance than to execute it. If she had continued to make a second cut when cutting off the scimitar, Feli would not be standing here intact now. Several girls appeared one after another on the bridge. Without exception, they were all wearing swimsuits that exposed large areas of their beautiful skin. The youngest child looks no more than 10 years old, and the oldest one is about the same age as Ling. It can be seen from their appearance that they are from different races. Feli, who was standing on the deck with her waist in her arms, turned around and waved to the girls, and then they all came around the deck. "These children are all crew members of this ship. Except for me, the others on these ships are all children of their age." Feli said this, but she actually looked to be about the same age as teacher Letica. The reason why the two of them looked particularly mature in Ika's eyes was probably related to their mature dress. The girls gathered on the deck all looked at Ika and his group with either curiosity or fear. "Let's get straight to the point. This fleet is the property of the gods. I only borrowed it temporarily." Led by Fei Li, the four of them were now sitting in the meeting room. Feli, who already knew they would come here, spoke first. The round window of the room had no curtains drawn down, and the girls who were left outside the room poked their little heads out from the window to look in from time to time. However, this did not affect the meeting between Feli and Lan Ming. The only people who cared about the situation outside the window were Ika and Ling, two students who rarely experienced formal occasions. "As you can see, I am a vampire myself, and the children on the boat are all from different races. This should be able to distance ourselves from the relationship between us and humans, right?" "Thank you, your explanation is very clear. I think you should already know why we are here. One of your crew members left such a message for Charlotte. I asked Kayla to do this. Speaking of which," Feli looked past Lan Ming and looked out the window, "I have asked Ziyu to call Kayla, haven't they come yet?" In the dormitory area of the ship, Ziyu, who was entrusted with important tasks by Feli, was still rejected by Carol. "Carol, someone really important is here. My sister will be angry if you don't come out." She kept knocking hard on the locked door of Corel's room, but the room was silent as if no one was there. At this time, Corel was trying hard to block out the constant knocking on the door, sitting on her bed with her knees crossed. She had always hoped that the only two people from August would come here. She did not want to meet the three seniors living in the administrator's cabin. It wasn't that Ika and the others did anything that disgusted Karel. On the contrary, it was Karel who couldn't show her face in front of them. Sorry. She hugged her knees and fell onto the bed, covering her head with a pillow. Even if he didn't show up, the seniors already knew that he had hidden it from them for so long, not to mention that he had personally hurt Ling and Luoluo. Feli already knew that she had been in contact with the Nemesis Society, but she didn't know that she would not tell her seniors about this fact. If she goes out now, Karel will be tortured by guilt in front of her seniors and have to confess everything to them. Zio outside the door was still talking, but she couldn't hear clearly after covering her head with a pillow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. And La Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 358. Feli is the successor of a small city in the vampire clan. According to the family's inheritance regulations, she must complete trials set by other races before she can return to her hometown. The Protoss raised two topics for me. One was to deal with a small group that smuggled magic weapons, and the other was to bring back their princess. Then they lent me this fleet. In fact, there was originally a Protoss here. The crew arranged the trip, but later took in many homeless orphans along the way, the same group of children you just saw. However, the ship could not accommodate so many people, so I had to ask all the original crew members to go home and have a peaceful holiday. Captain Philly, normally shouldn't the children be sent back to the welfare institutions in the territory and the adult crew members should be left to work? Children are much cuter than those big and thick men. After saying that, Feli quickly pretended to cough lightly. Seriously, it's because I haven't completed the question about the gods yet, so I can't return to my territory for the time being. Arrange the children. I can't let go of letting the gods take care of them, so after thinking about it, I can only keep them all in front of me. Obviously, the first reason is Feli's sincerity, but the second reason also sounds like it comes from her sincerity. But since they are all girls, it shouldn't be for any evil intentions. The only one who would be troubled by this is Ika. Thank you. We are very clear about the situation on your side. You have told me the information about the ruins before. I would like to express my gratitude to you on behalf of myself. But this time, my identity and position are very different from the past. Can I still treat you as a companion? Compared with words like cooperation, I think companion is more appropriate. Although the help we can provide to Her Royal Highness is limited, it is this kind of trivial help that you need now, right? Indeed, any strength we can rely on now is what we urgently need. The communication between Feli and Lanming was not sloppy, and stating the positions of both parties was the main purpose of this meeting. Suddenly, the door was pushed open, and a little girl wearing a blue and white striped swimsuit burst in crying. Sister! Ziu, where is Kaylair? Still haven't come out of the room. I've been knocking on the door for a long time but there's no response. It's so nerve-wracking. Ling had already guessed that part of the reason for Kaylair's reluctance to show up was her fault. Does Karel-san know we are coming here? She knows. She probably doesn't want to meet you here. Lelu is still waiting for the opportunity to meet Karel on Yutrashir, but it seems that it will be a little difficult now. Feli saw Ika and Ling's expressions of embarrassment. Do you need to see Karel in an emergency? Actually, I have a friend who wants to meet classmate Karel, so she followed us here specially. She is an elf like classmate Karel. The standby personnel on the aviation magic ship Yggdrasil also boarded the flagship of the Sea Mist Fleet, and Ika deactivated the entity of Yggdrasil. Only then did Feli realize that the large aviation guided ship hanging above the Sea Mist Fleet was just a product of magic. Although I have heard of the ability of mechanical alchemy, I didn't expect that even an aviation-guided ship can be built. Philae sighed in surprise, and then turned her head excitedly. Let me tell you, can you build another one for our fleet? Where's a ship? This is a bit. It's just a joke, don't be so serious, young man. Speaking of which, is Philae's real age really the same as her appearance? Neither the gods nor the vampires, who have long lifespans, can tell their age based on their appearance alone. Elder sister. Before the three people who boarded the ship deck had time to look around their surroundings, a childish exclamation suddenly appeared among the girls watching. Only teacher Letica reacted to the familiar tone, and she was about to turn around to find the source of the sound. Sister, I miss you so much. The little figure in a navy blue one-piece swimsuit threw herself into the arms of Instructor Ridica. Before she could react in time, Instructor Ridica could only catch her petite body with both hands. The girl with long sideburns hanging down from her cheeks buried her face deeply into Teacher Letica's chest, and with a crying voice called her family who she missed day and night. Teacher Letica, who was still at a loss at first, finally recognized the voice she had not seen for 2 years. Ruby, is it really Ruby? Ruby raised her cheek from Teacher Letica's chest and looked up at her sister with tears in her eyes. Her childishness is much less than in Teacher Letica's memory, but she is still just a girl who makes people worry about her unconsciously when they see her. The girls who were watching began to whisper to each other. Is that person Ruby's older sister? The breasts are so big, they must be. So big and envious. But standing next to the stunned people, Philae just folded her hands and sighed a little. What a coincidence. Captain Philae, what coincidence are you referring to? Didn't I tell you before that I must bring back the princess of the gods? Now the task is completed. She was stunned for a moment, she still didn't know what Philae's words meant. Teacher Letica and Ruby, who had reunited after a long separation, were currently basking in the intertwined glances of the surrounding girls, snuggling up to each other warmly. The year when Teacher Letica officially graduated from Frost Moon Academy, she should have returned to the God Clan and succeeded the God Clan as queen. But she was unwilling to bear such a heavy responsibility, not to mention that the unrestrained gods didn't care whether there was a new queen or not. It was her family that objected to Teacher Letica giving up her inheritance rights. Although there is a second daughter, Ruby, in the family, they insist that the eldest daughter must inherit the queen's tradition. Therefore, when Teacher Letica ran away from home, it was not the entire Protoss that was pestering her, but only her family. Principal Phyllis is a symbol of the patriarch of the God Clan. She believes that it would be nice for Teacher Letica to do what she wants to do, so her family no longer pursues her so urgently. It happened that Philae came to the Protoss looking for a trial, and the Protoss casually put the problem of retrieving the princess into her hands. After hearing the truth that Teacher Letica confessed under Ruby's supervision and the sight of other girls, everyone's expressions could only be described as stunned. You stayed at Frost Moon Academy for the year after graduation, and Principal Phyllis was always there to help you. Well, only Principal Phyllis of Frost Moon Academy knows my identity, and she is still supporting me until now. Moreover, whether I go back or not will not cause trouble to the gods. The queen obviously just doesn't, it's just a useless title, only my family would be so persistent for this kind of thing. Teacher Letica, who unknowingly turned from complaining to complaining, completely turned into an immature child. Perhaps this is an annoyance that only Teacher Letica's family can understand. Except for her sister Ruby, everyone present may only have some weird emotions. Philae accepted the commission to bring Teacher Letica back to the gods. It was just a commission and not a mission. If Teacher Letica herself doesn't want to go back, she is also hesitating which wish it is better to follow. But why is Ruby here? Shouldn't she be at home? Sister, I am. Ruby has stayed here for 2 years, just to find you all over the world, Your Highness. Instructor Letica asked the captain of the Sea Mist Fleet, and of course the only person to answer was Feli. I asked Captain Philly to let me stay here. Ruby seemed to want to say it no matter what, because, I think if I stay here, I might be able to see my sister one day. Then, this wish came true. Faced with Feli's realistic and slightly ironic confession and her sister Ruby's sincere appeal, teacher Letica thought sadly for a long time and could only gently let out the thoughts that were clogging her chest. Principal Phyllis hinted that before tutor Letica left Frost Moon Academy, she should return to the gods to fulfill her responsibilities. The words of her former tutor were definitely more meaningful than the persuasion of her parents. "Let's do this, Your Highness. How about you stay here tonight and think about it carefully? If you decide to go back, we will set off to the territory of the gods tomorrow morning." "I see. Elder sister. Okay, Ruby, stay with the queen. You don't have to worry about our affairs. Is Zio here?" I'm here," Zio suddenly popped out from behind the door and waved. "Sister, do you have any orders? Tell everyone to leave the sea area. The third princess may have attracted the attention of some people. She needs to avoid the limelight for the time being." "I see. Zio has been serving as Feli's communications specialist in the Sea Fog Fleet. Because she is a child who can't sit still, Feli will find something for her to do. What do you think?" Feli turned to look at the sharply increased number of outsiders. "How about staying here temporarily before Her Royal Highness makes a decision? Then it's up to you to take care of me." Lan Ming looked at Ika, and Ika nodded. Although the magic power stored in the magic equipment is theoretically inexhaustible, it is not enough to consume it for a long time. What's more, the magic equipment is no longer a simple magic weapon, but a girl living around him, at least for Ika. Lilu, who had been shrinking behind everyone, couldn't help but say, "Khalil-san. Oh, are you the person they said wanted to see Karel?" Yes. Rilu, who works as an accountant for the Shigetsuki Academy Student Union, is actually very good at social situations, but she is limited to classmates of similar age. Suddenly being taken to a strange ship and surrounded by a group of strange girls, she lowered her voice out of fear. Carol has been bored in the room and refused to come out. Zia called but there was no response. "You should follow them and go to Carol's room to find her in person." Feli casually waved to call one of the girls around her and asked her to take Lelo to Corel's room. "Excuse me, can I go with Lilu-san too?" Ling. Ika looked at Ling, who made such a request in confusion. Was she so concerned about Corel's affairs? "I just stopped by to ask something." Ling simply responded to Ika with this sentence. She wasn't going to reveal anything until last night's confusion was resolved. End La Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 359. The girl took Ling and Lilu to Corel's room and left. Lilu tried knocking on the door. "Khalil, are you here? I am Lilu from the student union. Although I have not met you directly, do you have any impression?" After waiting for a long time, there was no response, as if there was no one in the room from the beginning. Lilu looked at Ling at a loss. Ling also had a headache for such a stubborn child. "Kulater, you should know that this kind of wooden door can't stop me, right? If you don't open the door again, I will use force to solve it." "Classmate Ling, don't use threats. This is actually the most effective method, isn't it?" Ling didn't know if what he said had any effect. If Karel had thought about the other companions living here, she would have succumbed to her own threats. Because this place is different from the school building of Shimizuki Academy, but is surrounded by ships. Karel has no place to hide. Ling and Lilu no longer struggled with the question of who was right and who was wrong. They only focused on paying attention to any movement coming from across the door. After a long wait, the wooden door of the room finally opened quietly. "Karel, wearing a light pink petticoat with half of her face hidden in a scarf, was standing behind the door. She didn't look at the two people outside the room, but stared at her feet unnaturally. Very good. Lilu finally breathed a sigh of relief. She was just worried about what would happen if Karel really didn't give up the resistance and Ling entered the room with force. Maybe Ling is just talking about it and won't actually do it. Lilu and Ling have spent a lot of time interacting with each other because of the overlapping work of the student union and the discipline team, and they also have a certain understanding of Ling's style. I'm sorry, Senior Ling, Senior Sister Lilu. Can we go in? Karel had no reason to refuse the two people who had already come to the door in person. Ling and Lilu walked into Karel's room. There was nothing special about the room, but they could feel that it was indeed the girl's private space. On Karel's bed, a white furry creature bounced on the pillow. Its body was as cute as a marshmallow. Ling recognized it at a glance as the magical beast Mao Yu, who had been picked up by Karel from outside Xuanjiao Academy when she was about to die and had been treated by Luo Luo. However, she didn't know why it hadn't grown up after so long. Kyle-san, that is. Ah, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Lilu just asked casually, and Karel hugged Mao away from the pillow as if she was afraid that her senior would be angry. After Mao Yu was put into the arms of her master, she became obedient. Lilu and Ling smiled bitterly and sat down opposite Karel, looking at the layout of the room. After a short silence, Lilu spoke carefully. Classmate Karel, can I ask you something about your family? This topic didn't matter to Ling, who didn't know the inside story. She just gave Lilu the opportunity to ask questions first. The only person here who understands why she asked this is the person being asked the question, Seraph Karel. It's not a matter of concern. The student union has information about you, so I also know your identity. I want to come here to see you for this reason. Is it because I am a six-winged elf? Karel, who sat down with his hands on the edge of the bed, obviously didn't want to talk about this issue. Lilu pursed her lips. She was the one who found it difficult to talk to her younger generation. Actually, my family was also among those who jointly declared that they would treat the six-winged elves differently. The words Lilu said as if talking to herself made Karel's shoulders tremble slightly. Ling saw this subtle movement in her eyes. She just sat aside and listened quietly to the conversation between Lilu and Karel. Sister Lilu, you don't think so, right? That has nothing to do with you. No, it has something to do with me. I won't say that just because I was not directly involved, I can absolve myself from responsibility. If Karel-san thinks so, why are you here now when you were not directly expelled from the race? Karel's tone seemed bleak. I just want to prove myself. Prove? I have never hated my identity, but I want to prove that the six-winged elves do not have to be excluded. This is the reason why Karel did not hide that she is a six-winged elf from Frost Moon Academy and Ica. She can calmly accept the identity that belongs only to her. One of Lilu's worries can be put aside. At least Karel has no concept of revenge against the elves. She came to Karel, who had shrunk her shoulders, and gently hugged her body. Perhaps I am not qualified to say this as the perpetrator, but the elves no longer reject the six-winged elves. The Elf King proved that magic costumes and natural elves are not in a contractual relationship with each other. The past misunderstandings about magic costumes no longer exist. The six-winged elves have led the entire elves out of the cross-border war. They are the real heroes. So, even if you and your family return to the elves, you will no longer receive any strange looks. Lilu could feel Karel's mood at the moment. This mood was neither joy nor anger, but something calmer. Even if Karel is told about the current situation of the elves, it is impossible for her to return to the elves calmly. It is not difficult to change the direction of rumors. What is difficult is to eliminate the existing barriers between the two groups of people. Classmate Karel, I am here to apologize to you. This is an exchange between the next generation as perpetrators and victims, both of whom stand on the same level. Lilu has a reason to apologize to Karel, and Karel also has the responsibility to accept Lilu's apology. I also want to tell you this fact. In this case, you don't have to take risks to make so-called proofs, right? And these words were the words of Karel Sr., Lelo Senpai, conveyed to her. Karel hasn't cried yet, but she just has the urge to cry loudly in Lilu's arms. Ling stood up from the chair and prepared to leave the room. Until now, Ling had only left space for the two people who depended on each other, but she herself had not said anything. Classmate Ling. I just came to see if Karel was injured when she helped Charlotte leave August. Senior Ling, please wait a moment. We will all stay here tonight. If you have anything to say to me, just come to me then. Ling walked out of the room and closed the door behind her back. Before she even uttered her question, she already knew the answer. Even if that were true, Ling couldn't get angry now. Maybe it's because Karel's experience has affected her mood, or maybe it's been too long and I've forgotten how to be angry. Tonight, Karel should come to her room to confess the mistakes she has committed. Let's leave this kind of problem to think about at that time. End La Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 360. Dinner time at Sea Mist Fleet is like a party. There may also be a restaurant in the cabin that can accommodate these 30 girls, but the place for dining is still the brightly lit deck. Ika looked at the surrounding sea and saw that the decks of the ships around the flagship were also lit up with lights that were not inferior to those here. How many ships are there in the Sea Mist Fleet? I heard there are 8 ships in total. The people over there are also very happy. Wei 11, who was sitting next to Ika, stared at the brightly lit sea with warm eyes. Didn't Captain Philly say that there are no adult crew members? Are the other ships controlled by children? It hurts. Ika suddenly felt her hair being pulled hard. Don't treat us like children. When he turned around, he realized that it was Ziyu who was standing on the stool, bulging her cheeks and glaring at herself. Ziyu, don't stand on the stool. One of the older girls tapped the edge of the bowl with her chopsticks, and Ziyu's bunny ears that were shaking back and forth suddenly went limp. She made another cute face to Ika before sitting back on the stool with great satisfaction. I'm sorry, please let me explain. I didn't treat you as children just now. But you obviously said child. Ah, I did say that casually. Okay, I sincerely apologize to Master Ziyu. Humph. Since you have sincerely apologized, I will forgive you mercifully. Ziyu crossed her arms and accepted Ika's apology like a mature adult. Ika's apology was of course sincere, but it also contained a hint of teasing Ziyu. Ziyu was completely immersed in a small sense of satisfaction because she thought she behaved in a manner befitting a mature lady. At this time, Ika felt someone gently tugging at the corner of her clothes. Brother Ika. What's wrong, Wei 11? Wei 11's eyes wandered for a moment. Is the food here delicious? Huh? I think it's delicious. Does it taste better than at home? It can't be compared. If you want to talk about Lulu. Ika paused for a moment, and then changed the way of saying it. It's just that the food cooked at home has a different taste. I think so. Wei 11 turned her head and chewed her dinner again. Ika was confused for a while, still not sure why she asked suddenly. It sounds like Wei 11 is simply homesick. But now that I have left Shimizuki Academy for less than a day, this is probably not the reason. After dinner time, the girls quickly cleared the deck. The warm atmosphere just now was no longer visible on the deck with the lights turned off. All that can be felt at this moment is the tranquility of the sea breeze and the surging water. Instructor Letica held onto the bridge railing alone, letting the salty sea breeze blow her hair. Teacher Letica. Teacher Letica turned around and recognized the person walking towards her through the moonlight. It turns out to be Ika-san. Ika came to mentor Letika's side and put her weight on the railing of the bridge. "Aren't you going to rest? It's hard to stay in that kind of place." He smiled sheepishly. "Except for Ika, all the people on this ship are girls. The soundproofing effect of the room is not very good, and the sound of girls playing sweetly comes from the next door and the corridor. In other words, the entire ship is equivalent to the girls' dormitory of Frost Moon Academy, and boys like Ika should have been banned." Everywhere he looked, there were girls who had changed out of their swimsuits and put on pajamas. As a man, he looked out of place among them. Even when walking in the aisle, you are filled with the olfactory stimulation of a mixture of fragrances that you can't tell whether it's shampoo or body wash. The 6 girls who were traveling with them were quickly accepted by the girls on the boat, but in the end, only she escaped. "Haha, just pretend to come out and see the rare night view of the sea. Can't you see the sea in Ika-san's hometown? Ling, which is very close to my house, can see the sea level at any time. Eh? Are you and classmate Ling childhood sweethearts?" "No, no, I just found out not long ago that our homes are very close to each other. We never met each other when we were children." "Really? I thought the 2 families known as the 2 Towers of Bizi would have frequent exchanges. It was only after I left home that I learned that my family had such a history. I didn't even know the concept of magic costumes before." "So that's it?" Instructor Letika stopped talking and did not delve deeper into the issues of the 2 families. She turned her gaze back to the horizon. Driven by the sea breeze, the fluctuations of the sea surface divide the bright moon reflected on it into irregular small pieces. "I seem to have walked into Principal Phyllis's trap." "Trap?" Principal Phyllis probably knew that this would be the case. She whispered. Although he didn't say it specifically to Ika, Ika heard it. "Teacher Letika is not just standing here admiring the night view on the sea, but hoping that the sea breeze can take away her worries. If Ruby hopes so much, I can't keep her waiting." Instructor Letika has not yet made a decision whether to return to the God Clan to succeed the Queen, or to return to Frost Moon Academy. Teacher Letika's sister, Ruby just wants to know that you can go home, but she doesn't necessarily want you to take over that position, right? Going home and succeeding have the same meaning, so I never went home. The responsibilities that Teacher Letika shoulders are far beyond what Ika can understand, so he cannot share them with Teacher Letika. When she first entered school, the Teacher Letika who came to greet her had no sense of maturity as a teacher at all, as if she was just a senior who was almost the same age. When taking care of students on weekdays, she is more like a kind sister. Even the love issues between girls will be discussed with tutor Ritika, even though she herself has no experience in this area. "Teacher Letika, it was only when you saved us from the 4th level monsters at the ruins that you made me realize that this power must be used to protect important people." "Eh? Thank you, thank you. I think that for Teacher Letika, Ruby and we may be in the same important position. Is it because you want to stay in Frost Moon Academy that you refuse the position of Queen? Although the thought of escaping from trouble must be mixed in, it is indeed my wish to stay in Shimizuki Academy. Ika-san, do you know?" Letika looked far away to the turbulent sea level. "The scene at that time may have appeared in front of my eyes. When I was the tutor of the twin class, it was the most fulfilling time in my life." Instructor Letika, who had just graduated from Frost Moon Academy, had been assisting the previous teacher in the twin class for a year, which was the last year of the previous twin class. After the graduation of the previous twin class, the new first-year students were entrusted to tutor Letika. At that time, teacher Letika had not yet had time to get over the sadness of separation, and her work was not going well. "Am I not suitable for this job? For the first time, I have realized my long-held dream, and I have students worth cherishing for the rest of my life. Why did it become like this? All I can think about is this kind of thing." During the period when teacher Letika was frustrated, it was the students she taught who encouraged her. "Chiuke, who is also the student council president and class monitor, leads the class and brings new hope to teacher Letica. She got here with the support of students she will cherish throughout her life. As a mentor, I am encouraged by my own students. Although it is not glorious, I can still be proud of it. The flashing phosphorescence on the sea cast light and shadow on the side of teacher Letica's face, with a faint smile on her lips. Perhaps teacher Letica didn't notice that she was still confiding to her students the voice she treasured deep in her heart. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Ika did not look in the direction of teacher Letica, but just interpreted her confession without authorization. Isn't it a great blessing to have people you can rely on and a privilege that you can be proud of? Teacher Letica didn't seem to have recovered from Ika's words. She stared at Ika's profile in confusion. Speaking of someone she can rely on, the first thing that comes to Ika's mind is her face. I am Luoluo's brother, but Luoluo rarely acts coquettishly towards me. On the contrary, if I had not spent the same time with her and been encouraged by her countless times, I would not be able to become strong now. Although I don't know if I can be called strong as I am now, but in order not to let Luoluo down, I must become strong. Recalling everything she had with Luoluo, Ika had endless things to say. After meeting Ling and Wei 11 during the journey, different colors were added to the memories. As his footsteps reach more and more places, he meets more and more companions along the way, and more bonds are formed along the way. Ika realizes that people must support each other to move forward. But at this time, he just wanted to tell teacher Letica, if there is someone you can rely on, there is no need to feel guilty about it, just feel and cherish this precious gift. New footsteps appeared on the deck behind the two men. Ruby was no longer wearing a navy blue one-piece swimsuit, but instead put on a pale white animal nightgown. Her exposed feet under the nightgown were wearing plush slippers for indoor use. Elder sister. Ruby called to teacher Letica softly and looked at Ika timidly. Are you afraid of yourself? This small animal-like behavior reminded Ika of Wei 11, and a feeling of intimacy suddenly surged in her heart. Now that Ruby has come out to find her sister, he shouldn't stay here and disturb them both. Teacher Letica, I will go back to the room first. Yes, Ika-san. Tomorrow, I will definitely make a decision. The haze from a few minutes ago was gone from teacher Letica's voice, and Ika was honored to be the one she could rely on. He left the space behind him to the two sisters. Unexpectedly, Ruby suddenly took a step forward and hugged her waist tightly. No, don't go. She tried her best to convey the sentence to Ika. With her strength, she could not stop Ika, but Ika had to stop. Even teacher Letica was frightened by Ruby's sudden move. Ruby, let go of Ika-san. I heard what the eldest brother and sister just said over there. But Ruby didn't let go, and her words made Ika understand what was going on. Ruby, what I just said doesn't have any special meaning. I just thought of it. Please don't leave my sister. Even if my sister returns to the God clan, she will never see her big brother forever. Please don't abandon her for this reason. Wait, Ruby, what are you talking about? Ruby, don't bother Ika-san anymore. Even though teacher Letica tried to pull Ruby away from Ika, Ruby had no intention of relaxing her strength. However, in the end, she was separated from teacher Letica and Ika, and tears immediately burst out of her eyes. I don't want my sister to break up with my eldest brother for me. My eldest brother must be able to help my sister better than me. Ruby said with a cry while wiping her eyes. After hearing these words, instructors Ika and Letica only had question marks in their minds. The first person to realize that Ruby had misunderstood something was teacher Letica. Her cheeks could be seen turning red even under the moonlight. Ruby, Ika-san and I don't have that kind of relationship. Wait a minute, Ruby. The relationship between me and teacher Letica is not what you imagined. While the two of them were scrambling and stammering to explain this subtle misunderstanding, Most of the other girls in the cabin had already fallen asleep. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. And La Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 361. The sea mist fleet sailed for 3 days in the sea where no land could be seen in the surrounding area. It is said that it is now very close to the territory of the gods. Mari, give me this box and you go push the cart out. Okay, thank you. The girl who was working together in the cabin obediently handed Ika the small wooden box she was holding in both hands, then turned and walked into the depths of the warehouse to find the trolley Ika needed. The same small wooden boxes were piled up in the cabin's warehouse. It is said that these are all ingredients stored by the sea mist fleet for its voyage around the sea. On sunny days, they will all be moved from the dank warehouse to the deck. The sound of wheels rolling could be heard deep in the dark warehouse. It seemed that Mari had found the old pallet truck that had been gathering dust for a long time. It looks like it can hold quite a lot with this, the place can be emptied out quickly. Brother, do you really don't need to ask others to help? Mari has already helped me a lot just by being here. Is that so? Hey. Originally, emptying the warehouse required the concerted efforts of the girls on the ship and took more than half a day to complete. This is caused by the fact that in order to provide more living space for the girls, the space left for the warehouse is too small. But now the only young man on the ship, Ika, has taken over this physical work, so only Mari, who is responsible for daily management of the warehouse, is left to help. Ika climbed up the ladder that was set up and lifted the small wooden boxes out one by one from the top. Mari, who was waiting below, took it with both hands and placed it on the cart next to her. Probably to take care of the strength of the girls, the wooden box used to store the ingredients is not large or particularly heavy, but this is only compared to Ika. The petite Mari often wobbles unsteadily when carrying boxes, which looks very distressing. There are many girls with weak strength like her. During these 3 days of doing nothing, Ika didn't know if it was because the girls on the boat were already familiar with him, and they no longer avoided him like they did on the first day. It seems we can only transport so much at a time. Ika tried pushing the cart, and the stacked small wooden boxes didn't seem to place much burden on the 4 supporting wheels. I'm here to help too. Oh, please. No. This is what I should do. Blushing, Mari shook her head in denial, then carefully got into the space between Ika and the cart, and helped push the fully loaded cart out of the warehouse. As soon as Ika and Mari pushed the cart onto the sun-drenched deck, the girls waiting to unload swarmed up and snatched away the small wooden boxes on the cart. Around the deck, there were several small teams carrying out fishing operations. After living in the sea for such a long time, the girls have become completely accustomed to seizing every opportunity to replenish various supplies needed for daily life. Fishing nets are still a common tool for fishing operations, and girls work in groups to cast fishing nets onto the sea. Suddenly, bursts of cheerful laughter came from a certain group, and the girls in other groups were attracted and put down their tools and gathered around. What happened over there? Ahaha, maybe someone got entangled in other groups' fishing nets when they went into the sea. Get some rest, Mari. I'll go over there and take a look. Okay, alright. Ika touched Mari's head and walked towards the side of the ship where the girls were gathered. The fact was just as Mari had guessed, the girl caught in the fishing net was floating on the sea in full swing, waving her hands in protest. Not far from the accident scene, another group of children and girls who did not use fishing nets were sitting quietly on the side of the boat. The slender fishing rods raised high were their favorite tools. Ika found Way 11 among them. Today she wore a big straw hat to block the sun. Way 11 didn't seem to notice Ika approaching and yawned quietly. There was not a single ripple in the small bucket placed next to Way 11. It seems that she has found nothing so far, so it is natural that she would be bored. Way 11 narrowed her eyes slightly and glanced to the side inadvertently. Only then did Way 11 notice that Ika was beside her. "Ai, brother Ika. It doesn't seem to be going well." "Woo. Although I want to help you, I have no experience in fishing. I've been sitting here for a long time. The most important thing is to have the confidence that you will definitely catch it." "What are you talking about here?" Ling, who had just finished practicing swordsmanship with Feli, probably only heard Ika's last words. "You're here just in time. You should know a lot about fishing, right?" "Not at all." "Why would you think that? Isn't there the sea near your hometown? Do you think that everyone who lives by the sea should know how to fish?" Ling said, picking up Way 11's fishing rod. "I knew it would be like this. It would be a miracle that I could still catch fish like this." "Eh." Way 11 looked at the missing bait and blinked hard to make sure she saw it right. Ling sighed, took out a new bait from the blue storage box, hung it up, and then swung the fishing line into the distant sea. "Oh. Isn't this impressive? Stop making sarcastic comments here. Aren't you going to help move the goods? That kind of work can be done in 3 strokes, 5 divisions, and 2. Mari needs to rest too. I didn't expect you to become so popular after just one day. Don't make it sound like I was annoying before. After all, you are the only one here, huh?" Ling slowly retracted the line. "It seems that I caught something." "Did you catch it?" Way 11 lay down on the railing of the boat with excitement and watched the winding trajectory of the fishing line. Ling intuitively judged the time when the pole could be closed, and suddenly pulled the pole out of the water. The fishhook was raised high in the air and was directly illuminated by the sun. It dazzled the eyes of the 3 people who followed the fishhook. After her vision was restored, Way 11 was delighted to see a plump sea fish lying on the deck and flapping its tail. "Ah!" After a while, Way 11 came back to her senses from the joy of harvest. She quickly trotted over to the quiet fish with the bucket in both hands, carefully holding its slippery body and putting it into the water. Ling didn't seem to think that she could really capture a living prey in a few seconds. Her face was filled with disbelief. "Maybe this is talent. Ling, how about fishing for the ocean overlord as your lifelong goal from now on?" "Go to hell." End La Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 362. At night, even Ika felt some pain in her waist and shoulders as she moved back and forth to move the goods stored in the warehouse. The fresh water purification device used by the Sea Mist Fleet seems to be a device made using the technology of the Protoss. Ika, who was born in the magic machinery department, asked Feli about it out of curiosity and determined that this device did not fall into the category of magic machinery at all. Then, I took a comfortable shower in my specially open temporary bathroom. Ika, who had fully recovered her fatigue points, put on her bathrobe, hung a towel around her neck, and prepared to return to her room. "Speaking of which, it seems that we will arrive at our destination tomorrow morning." Thinking of this, Ika turned and walked in the opposite direction. Teacher Letica had already made a decision after that night. After arriving in the territory of the gods, there were all kinds of things waiting for Teacher Letica that required her to worry about. Boarding the Sea Mist Fleet is not the main purpose of Ika and the others, and the gods may not be interested in the problems of human countries. Regarding the future action plan, we must discuss it clearly with Feli, who has declared her support for Lan Ming. The captain's cabin is located near the top of the bridge. Ika climbed onto the spiraling bridge, listening to her footsteps on the iron stairs. At this time, a ray of light emerged from the gap in the ajar door of the captain's room. It seemed that Feli had not rested yet. Ika put her hands into the sleeves of her yukata, sorted out the questions in her mind, and then walked straight over. However, before he even got close to the ajar door, he could hear a sound similar to gasping coming from the room. The confused Ika stepped lightly and looked into the room through the ajar door. Under the swaying lights that were dimmed intentionally or unintentionally, two figures cuddled up on the sofa in the center of the room. The girl who was sitting on Feli's lap had her back to the door, and she could only be vaguely identified from her back as a girl who was supposed to be in the dormitory area at the moment. Harmony section. Feli put on the pajamas for the lost girl and gently stroked her little head. Not long after, the girl fell asleep in Feli's arms. After doing this, Feli laid the sleeping girl on her bed in a princess hug position, took off her military uniform and covered her body. Then he walked out of the captain's room. Ika left the doorway when he saw it, leaning on the stairwell on the same floor away from the captain's room and looking at the sea level in the distance. "I'm sorry, that kid didn't close the door tightly when he came in, so you saw something you shouldn't have seen. It doesn't matter. Is that the vampire's vampire urge? Well, it turns out that the vampire urge is no longer a secret to humans." Feli also leaned against the fence of the stairwell like Ika. "Please just pretend that you didn't see the accident tonight. It's not just for I and the children don't want others to see this. Have they all been through it? The vampire urge that Ika knows is an instinctive behavior of vampires, but it is not difficult to suppress. Now it is said that there are drugs that can help vampires suppress this instinct and no longer need to suck blood directly from other people. My magical equipment, the splitting sky gun, will shorten the cycle of blood-sucking impulses." After they knew about this, they developed into this situation. Since this is the way of survival for the Sea Mist Fleet, Ika will not comment much on it. "As expected, you drove away all the original crew members. Is that the reason why you kept them on the ship? The blood of a girl is much sweeter than that of a tall and thick man." The two looked at each other and smiled, ending this somewhat inappropriate topic. "Well, let's get down to business. You shouldn't be here just for peeping, right? I didn't even think about spying." With a slight cough, Ika brought back the topic that had gradually strayed away. Regarding the arrangements after entering the territory of the Protoss tomorrow, and the next move of the Sea Mist Fleet. As night falls in the city, the colorful lights blooming due to the diffusion of sunlight during the day gradually dissipate and are replaced by the hazy colors of the moonlight. Buildings floating in mid-air cast deep black shadows on the moonlight's backside, and unknown birds and beasts gathered in groups and flew freely among the floating buildings. A girl in a jet-black dress stood on the roof of one of the floating buildings, letting the evening breeze blow her silky sky-blue hair. The close-fitting jet-black dress seemed to be tailor-made for her, like a wedding dress dyed in ink, exuding cold pressure and inexplicable tenderness. Image. "I will keep looking, and what about you? Will you keep looking?" The murmur conveyed to someone by lightly opening the lips is carried to the distant sea level by the ruthless evening wind. The surrounding scenery was extremely dreamy, but her figure standing under the moonlight was particularly lonely. Endless Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 363. Chapter 363. In the world next door, playing basketball, making music, and playing shogi can attract little girls. Writing novels and making butter can also attract beautiful girls. Goodbye, I am leaving for the next door. Closer to home, the above are all dreams. Although there are various rumors about the entrance to the second dimension in the world, I have not found that entrance. AI Chino can be seen on the opposite side of the hanging rope, and the double-headed metal rod is inserted into the two small holes in the wall. I can be extremely responsible and say something here. Wake up, stop dreaming. Back to business again. Endless Silver Weapon is now in its 10th volume. Can it be called a hardcore school battle or harem romance light novel? Although there is still a huge gap from the ideal, just as everyone's story is different, Ika and his harem, the family members are also attached to each other and fight side by side in their world. Does the above look like a postscript to the final volume? But this is not the final volume, because Luoluo hasn't gone home yet. As everyone has noticed, Ika and the girls have less time to spend time with each other. But as the saying goes, XX is like water in a sponge, there will always be squeeze when the camera moves away from their bodies. Everything can only be meant, but cannot be expressed in words. The above is not a preview of the short story collection. The battle scenes are actually a bit difficult for me to work on. In order to enhance the visual appeal of the battle scenes, I have recently done a lot of work in this aspect. I was filled with emotion after seeing the battle scenes depicted by many seniors, and I hope to learn from their brush strokes in my future writing. In this way, the 10th volume of Endless Silver Machinery has come to an end. The following is a thank you. Illustration Teacher Kombucha, the time for coloring this cover is really tight. Thank you very much for sending the girls who are so vivid on the paper. Having said that, the color illustrations in volumes 5 and 10 are all dedicated to Logo Logo. First of all, I would like to state that this is not the author's conspiracy, but a simple coincidence. Editor-in-Chief, Mr. Cheese, thank you very much for your daily care. I said before that I would work hard to learn how to write an outline, but I haven't had time to fulfill my promise until now. Although it is still a rough outline, please try your best to use your imagination to understand it. Finally, I must express my deep gratitude to all readers. Endless Silver Machine has reached 1 million words. This is a surprise that I never thought of before I started writing. I sincerely hope that everyone can continue to pay attention to the journey that is both theirs and ours. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Endless Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 365. Before the birth of magic technology, humans were the weakest race on this continent. Magic technology, which has now become synonymous with the race humanity, is a technology born from the ideal of mass production of magic equipment. In the cross-border war 100 years ago, humans for the first time used the magic power they relied on for survival outside of daily life. Magic gradually replaced the status of cold weapons and hot weapons on the battlefield. Just as the invention of gunpowder in the past marked a greatly enhanced human ability to transform nature, the diversified use of magic is a big step forward in the history of human development. However, in this continent where many races coexist, there are countless other races that understood the nature of magic earlier than humans. For humans, the magic that still remains at the conceptual level of tool has long become an inseparable part of them. In the year 917 of the new calendar, a ray of refreshing sea breeze took May away. The clear blue sky, thin clouds, and the gradually rising warm sun all announce the arrival of early summer. The sleeping sea rises as regularly as its breath. Reefs engraved with complex inscriptions stand on the sea. The rocks beaten by the waves serve as part of the media to construct the base point of the border of the divine tribe's territory. When the first ray of the morning sun penetrated the barrier and refracted the colorful brilliance, the sea that had just woken up from its sleep lifted the veil of dense fog. The ocean fleet emerging from the thick fog passed through the strait with the barrier as the dividing line and officially entered the territory of the gods. That kind of barrier is the same type as the barrier between Chiyu Academy and the ruins, right, Way 11. Principal Phyllis used many small barriers as the base points of the magic circle, and then connected them together to form the big barrier that protects Frost Moon Academy, but the ruins and the barrier here are both complete are different. Way 11 couldn't tell exactly what was different. She was a little worried that she had not explained clearly and would not be helpful to Ika's problem. After speaking, she quietly peeked at his side face. Ika let out a long groan against her chin, and then sighed as if she gave up thinking. Ling, who stood next to Ika and Way 11 and looked at the sea view, listened to their conversation indifferently. It wasn't until Ika sighed that he turned his face sideways in confusion. Ika, has your head finally been hit by a boat? My mind is clear now and my thoughts are flowing smoothly. Do you want me to recite the outline of the magic theory assessment to you now? What's the use of just memorizing the assessment syllabus? If you fill in the assessment syllabus on the test paper, will you be graded according to the number of words? Then just memorize the weekly rhythm table of elements. I learned the homophonic memory from Chuke. It's like cheating. No need, I don't want to hear that kind of tongue twister. Besides, my specialty is the assault department, so there is no need for such rigid theories. It's just because you always said this kind of thing that you did it during the final test last semester. You're not much better. Isn't my overall score higher than yours? Seeing Ika and Ling exposing each other's wounds over the final test results that had ended long ago, Wei 11, who thought she had to stop them, finally found an opportunity to get between them. Test results cannot prove anything. As expected of being second in the school year, I'm really rich. Babble. Caught by Ling's condescending and sharp eyes, the courage she finally mustered up disappeared like a deflated balloon. Wei 11 suddenly hid behind Ika. Why did the three people present discuss the issue of the final test at an inappropriate place and at an inappropriate time? This is all because while everyone is wandering around the continent and completely failing to fulfill their obligations as students, the final test of this semester of Shigetsuki Academy is coming again. In the new semester of the second grade, the four people who live together in the administrator's cabin visit the classroom only a handful of times. Ling, Wei 11 taught you well during the review meeting, so you shouldn't take it out on her, right? TCH, just know how to protect her. The final test of Shimizuki Academy consists of two parts, a theoretical test and a practical test. Successful admission and graduation are determined based on the combined scores of the two. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. If you don't pay attention to making up for your shortcomings, the final overall results will definitely not be optimistic. The four people in the caretaker's cabin are a very typical example. There was a very obvious polarization in their overall results, so much so that during the class meeting, instructor Letica used it as an example to admonish the entire class. Luoluo and Wixi's high scores were in theory and practical skills respectively, and their scores in the other subject were also maintained at the upper middle level. Therefore, their overall scores ranked first and second in the school year, creating the highest score among transfer students in the history of Shiyu Academy. Leading precedent. On the other hand, Ika and Ling's scores in the practical test were in the middle and upper reaches, but their scores in the theoretical test were terrible, which perfectly lowered the final overall score. Probably Wei 11's interjection had an effect. After calming down, the two finally realized that this argument was completely meaningless now. Having said that, it doesn't matter what happens to that kind of thing. Is now the time to worry about the final test? This is the territory of the gods, and we don't know how far away from Frost Moon Academy is. Ika, please don't take the final test so seriously. Teacher Letica's voice came from behind, and the three of them hurriedly closed their mouths and turned around. Although Teacher Letica's words were very gentle, it was not difficult for the students to interpret the reproach behind this tone. My sister, Ruby, who reunited after a long absence, stood behind Teacher Letica, still wearing the animal pajamas that covered her whole body. When her eyes met Ika's, Ruby smiled. Good morning, big brother. From the gentle and lovely smile, you can see a hint of Ritika's teacher. Is it because they are sisters that they are so similar? Perhaps in the eyes of Ling and Wei 11, Ruby's smile could only go so far. But for Ika, this smile has another meaning. Ruby once thought that Ika and mentor Letica were lovers. Although the two tried their best to explain and clear up the misunderstanding, Ruby was still hesitant. A young girl who has just begun to fall in love has never experienced the taste of love firsthand, so she can only explain this unfamiliar term from the love affairs of others. The girl's 14 years old is the age when she loves to dream. She must have firmly believed in her heart that Ika and teacher Letica are the love relationship she longed for. What can be done to completely eliminate this misunderstanding? Probably very difficult to do. Unless I personally teach her the taste of love. In some ways, this goal is more difficult to achieve. Girls in swimsuits came to the deck from the lower rooms one after another. It seems that from the moment you enter the colorful barrier, it is already the normal time to get up. You guys, didn't you sleep well last night? I woke up when I fell asleep. After I woke up, I couldn't fall asleep, so I went out for a walk. I was called out by Ika. Sister Ling, weren't you already changing clothes before brother Ika came? Did you remember it wrong, Xiao 11? Aren't I the one who wakes you up every morning? The corners of Ling's eyes twitched, and the side of his mouth raised a strange arc, trying to strangle the virtue of honesty in the cradle. However, Wei 11 is still hiding behind Ika, so Ling, who wants to punish the good boy, has no choice but to give up. From today on, the life of drifting at sea is over, and their trajectory has reached an important turning point. No matter what, the mood mixed with excitement and anxiety is uncontrollable, and no one can sleep peacefully in a comfortable bed until dawn. Now, the flagship everyone is on has sailed out of the strait, and the other ships are following one after another. Signal lights of different colors and frequencies flashed on the bridge, echoing each other, just like the sea covered with stars in the early morning. The barrier curtain symbolizing the border of the Protoss territory has gradually merged into the thin mist, but when you look up, you can still see the colorful barrier covering the vast sky. Ling stretched her arms vigorously. The temperature at sea was slightly higher than on land. She was only wearing a thin off-shoulder coat, and her well-shaped breasts under the coat emphasized her sense of presence with this casual movement. After living together for such a long time, Ika no longer shows signs of blushing and embarrassment, but this precious scene can still easily cause ripples in his heart. You can see the land. It should be there, right? Huh? Well, that's right there. Ling's voice brought Ika, who was still wandering in peach reverie, back to reality. He didn't even see where the land Ling mentioned was, so he just echoed it without thinking. Ling has long been aware of Ika's words and deeds, and it can be seen from the attitude of his reply that he has something on his mind. Of course, such a perfunctory answer cannot be hidden from Ling's eyes. Still confused. It seemed that she didn't notice that the reason why she was distracted was because she was immersed in peach reveries, and Ika breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. At the same time, I also felt guilty for having the time to care about a girl's breasts at such a tense moment. But in the final analysis, physiological desire is the driving force for all things to survive and reproduce in this world. So this is just a physiological reaction that cannot be violated by any living thing, a primitive impulse imprinted in the chromosomes. Finally finding an excuse to forgive herself, Ika returned her attention to Ling's problem. The coastline symbolizing land can be vaguely seen in front of the flagship, and their sailing journey is about to end. No one can promise to survive with an unchanging belief throughout his life. A seemingly rock-solid belief can be easily shattered by some accident. When a once firm belief is questioned, it is what the world calls confusion. Maybe being confused is a good thing. Because it forces us to think with our own brains instead of blindly following the trend of the situation. Endless Silver Machine. Author, Muse Hiking. Chapter 366. The way we use magic is different from that in neutral areas. You will know it when you see it with your own eyes. As instructor Letica said, unlike neutral areas and human countries, magic has penetrated into every corner of the daily life of the gods. Groups of buildings float in mid-air for unknown reasons. Even if they appear to be arranged haphazardly without any rules on the surface, there will be no conflict. The power of the floating buildings is amazing, but what is even more eye-catching are the divine residents flying in the sky. There is no concept of transportation here. Space movement magic and levitation magic are the means of transportation in common sense. The figures flashing across the sky like comets made one couldn't help but admire that they would not collide. The silhouettes of residents on the street flickered. Even if they suddenly appeared in front of a certain store, they did not cause any panic among the people around them. Seemingly disorganized, yet orderly, this is the first impression left on everyone by the Protoss territory. Just imagine that if you use these two magics at will on the streets of the human country, you will be immediately regarded as a suspicious person and arrested. The same is about using magic when needed, but the difference is the understanding of the concept of magic. It's like the kingdom of witches in fairy tales. Wei 11 couldn't help but let out a small exclamation from her mouth. Ling, on the other hand, blocked the sunlight above her head with her hands, and her eyes followed the figure flying freely under the blue sky, full of yearning. If you can fly freely like that, you can probably experience the meaning of the word transform into the wind. Although there is no ordinary means of transportation, it has both group mobility and heavy weapons, which is similar to the aviation magic ship supported by magic technology. It dominates the airspace. Kong is a floating fortress built on the concept of light core. The overall structure is similar to pure three-dimensional geometry. It can accommodate individual subships and provide them with supplies and repairs. It can also carry heavy weapons that can rival large aviation-guided ships. It is equivalent to a mobile armed platform. If it needs to land on the ground, Kong can be reconfigured into a ground base within a few days, worthy of its name as a mobile fortress. Not only limited to airspace weapons, the Protoss unique light core is completely different from the concept of magic technology, which is a technology that this race has already used in cross-border wars. Probably, humans cannot understand and use it. Sitting in the chieftain's empty cabin, Ika came to this conclusion after listening to Instructor Letika's introduction. Although it seems that there is no need to use a mobile tool of this size to greet them at the port, it is said that this is the arbitrary action of Letika's mentor's parents and the current king of the gods. This is the palace of the gods. I hope everyone can forget this background and just think of this place as an ordinary hotel. In addition, this is a commission from Principal Phyllis, so I must watch you carefully. So I need you to stay here temporarily during this period. I'm sorry. There is no need to apologize so solemnly, Teacher Letika. Rather, it should be our honor to be able to enjoy the treatment of the palace just after arriving in the territory of other races. Ruby, who was walking beside Teacher Letika, quietly turned her face to look at Ika. Her big shining eyes seemed to encourage him to say more words to comfort Teacher Letika. Even after noticing Ruby's gesture, Ika still cruelly ignored her. Now, Teacher Letika and Ruby led everyone to walk in the courtyard corridor made of pure white bricks. The divine maid who led everyone was the one who came to the port to greet the two princesses. According to Instructor Letika, this woman whose majesty increases when she wears glasses is the chief chamberlain in charge of all the attendants in the palace. Everyone in the Sea Mist fleet chose to stay on the ship, and the girls seemed to be planning to use this time to renovate their beloved ship inside and out. On a sunny day, the colorful barrier is also the best place to dry clothes and food. Girls who have lived at sea for a long time will certainly not miss this opportunity. After the things on the ship are finished, I will take them to the town. They have also been looking forward to going ashore for a long time. That's what Philly said. The girls on the ship are all innocent children, and they are indeed not suitable for entering a serious place like the palace. Ruby is torn between her two identities, princess and crew member. She not only wanted to experience the fun of going ashore with her friends, but also wanted to spend more time with her long-lost sister. It wasn't until Philly pushed Ruby from behind that she made up her mind to accompany Teacher Letika back to the palace. Colorful sunlight shines on every corner of the courtyard covered with colorful plants, and small rainbows can be seen everywhere among the plants. In the main hall where the north, south, east and west could not be distinguished, the two princesses of the God clan parted ways with everyone here. Ruby and I are going to say hello to our parents next. Sorry, I have to excuse you. Everyone, please come this way. When the two masters turned to leave, the lady in charge seamlessly took over the task of leading the way. The only people visiting the Protoss Palace this time were Aika and Lan Ming. Lila did not follow Aika and the others. She promised not to participate in the struggle involving the two countries and the Nemesis Association. But Lila didn't have the means to go back alone, so she could only return with the Sea Mist Fleet, and temporarily stayed on the ship with Karel. Aika's two purposes are to help Lan Ming clear his name and to recapture Lolo from the Nemesis Society. Originally, Aika did not have much to do with the gods. But Lan Ming keenly pointed out the most immature part of the entire plan. The plan drawn up by the students must not have taken into account the power relations that they had never been exposed to. The approach of fighting alone may seem feasible, but it must have its limits. This was evident when Rosenberg robbed the prison. Without the help from the Holy See, it would have been impossible for everyone to quietly bypass the many checkpoints and reach the frontier city of Rosenberg. At some time that Aika and the others didn't know, Lan Ming made a request to teacher Letica for assistance from the gods. This was another task entrusted to tutor Letica by Principal Felice, so she did not reject Lan Ming's request. To provide shelter for the escapees, teacher Letica must take the position of Queen of the Gods. That was what troubled her that night. In the end, teacher Letica, who put aside the teacher-student relationship and revealed her troubles in front of Aika, resolutely returned to the place she once wanted to escape from. Instructor Letica's parents seemed very pleased that she was finally willing to go home. They warmly entertained Aika and his party, and decided to hold a throne handover ceremony in a week. The throne handover ceremony of the God clan is a celebration open to the whole clan, and such a grand ceremony is decided at the dinner table. In addition, Ruby's willful request to ask her parents to provide the guests with the most luxurious hospitality at the dinner table was also agreed to by them. Although I have long heard that the gods are a very free and casual race, isn't it a bit too casual? Or is this just the simple doting of parents on their children? Whatever the reason, things seem to be heading in the ideal direction step by step. After having dinner with teacher Letica's parents, the current king and queen of the God clan, Aika followed the maid arranged by teacher Letica alone to the large bathhouse used by the men of the royal family. The maid who led the way seemed to be taciturn, and Aika couldn't help but start thinking wildly when she couldn't find anyone to talk to. There are very few male companions around me who have accidents. Every time I travel, I am faced with the situation of having to move alone due to gender differences, which is particularly embarrassing. When talking about gay friends, the first thing that comes to mind is Carlo's face that even men have to admit. The title of noble young master is not unearned. In fact, Carlo is one of the few boys in Frost Moon Academy whose reputation is as good as Aika's. The difference between the two is that Aika has negative rumors that he hugs everyone and has many boats, while Carlo has positive rumors that he is a handsome young man and a gentleman. Ha! A helpless sigh came out of Aika's mouth, and the maid walking in front turned back to look at him with confusion. Apart from Carlo, Aika gets along well with most of the boys in the class, but the only one who gets along the closest is Carlo. Should a boy like Carlo be called handsome? Aika, who thought he was not handsome enough, could not make a comment, but he always felt that there was something else about Carlo's handsomeness that attracted people of the same sex. It is worthy of being a large bathing place only for the royal family, a double enjoyment of sight and feeling. Although this large bathhouse had been reserved for Aika alone, it didn't matter if he soaked in it until late at night, but he still came out of the water after fully enjoying it. The maid who led Aika seemed to have quietly left after completing her task. Only then did Aika begin to regret that she didn't remember the route when she walked here, but kept comparing the gap between herself and Carlo in her mind. The structure of the God clan's royal palace is no less complex than Lan Ming's castle. Should it be said that the residences of all princes and nobles in this world are similar? Aika has never been able to understand the state of mind of rich people until now. Every few steps he would come to a new fork in the road, and Aika could only choose a path based on intuition and vague memory. Speaking of which, there are no guards in such a big palace. Along the way, Ika didn't meet any waiters or guards. Otherwise, he could have asked for directions. I remember there is a saying that roughly means if every house does not need to be fortified, there will be peace in the true sense. Ika has not yet personally understood the Protoss society. But judging from Mentor Letica and Ruby, as well as the parents of the two of them whom I met today, it must be that the country they govern must be prosperous. Looking out the window, it seems that it is not very late yet. Everyone shouldn't be asleep yet, right? The decision to form an alliance between Lanming and the gods needs to be placed a week after Mentor Letica takes office as queen, so there is nothing to do during this period. Without the support of the Protoss, the Sea Mist Fleet's assistance would be limited to a certain extent, and it would be difficult to compete with the Bis Empire on its own strength. As for how to effectively use this time, Ika could only think of trying to collect information about the Nemesis Society. But the main scope of activities of the Nemesis Society is the Bis Empire. How can we get their information? Ika racked her brains to find a breakthrough behind the stagnation. Her feet just moved forward mechanically, and she walked straight past a fork in the road. The corridor of the palace is not infinite in length, and Ika has reached the end of the corridor without knowing it. There is no way. He looked around and saw that there were no other roads or rooms except the wooden door that was closed in front. Outside the window is still a green courtyard. When you first come to an unfamiliar environment, it is impossible to tell the direction based on the subtle differences in the furnishings in the courtyard. Thinking about it carefully, even if you go back the way you came, you may not be able to find the right way. Ika tried pushing the wooden door at the end of the corridor. The wooden door that can be opened so easily does not seem to lead to the outside of the palace. Across this wooden door, instead of the fluorescent lighting on the corridor, there is moonlight shining in from the dome. The dome is a completely transparent barrier that can decompose sunlight into 7 colors while still retaining the original silvery white of the moonlight. Ika walked into this room surrounded by green plants. Under her feet was the ground paved with cracked ashlar. The ashlar reflecting the moonlight would be very cool if she stepped on it with bare feet. Is this an indoor garden? The slightly humid air and the green scenery are very similar to the indoor garden of Shichizuki Academy. Different from the current near-summer climate in the Protoss territory, the room built into a greenhouse was slightly hot, and a mist that looked like steam surrounded Ika. Although the scenery here is indeed beautiful, Instructor Letica may be angry if she breaks in without permission. Ika, who was already about to turn around and leave, pushed aside the huge fan leaves hanging from the branches, and the green path suddenly opened up like a mini park. In the middle of the indoor garden is a steaming open-air bath. Milky white liquid continuously flows from the wooden channels on both sides. After entering the open-air bath, it immediately becomes crystal clear, and at the same time, there is a richer water vapor and a fragrance different from that of vegetation. Looking up at the dome, you can have an unobstructed view of the entire night sky from here. Because the style was very different from the royal men's bathhouse that she had just used, Ika did not immediately realize the real purpose of this place. Now turn around and leave. Just pretend you haven't been here before. Ika turned around pretending to be calm. This was indeed the best judgment to solve the current dilemma. If it hadn't been for the sound of other people's footsteps coming at this moment, Ika would have been able to leave this place of right and wrong that was limited to him safely.